Okay, so this panel is called Emerging Global Markets, Joining the Standards Movement. And so my name is Shayne Fairley. I'm the COO for Stellar MLS, as well as Universal Consulting Opportunities. And I'm joined by my colleague, Mathew. Mathew, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Mathew. I'm the Senior Vice President of Technology Innovation and Global Markets now as well, with my involvement at UCO.
Great. So many of you may be wondering, what is UCO, Universal Consulting Opportunities? I think that most everybody in the audience is aware of who Stellar is. And so just really wanted to tell everybody that Universal Consulting Opportunities was something that it's a subsidiary that we formed coming into the Paris conference for the International MLS Forum a couple years ago. And so we formed the subsidiary to kind of share our expertise. And we thought that it would be a little bit of a slow ramp kind of coming out of the conference, and it has not been. It's been an explosion of interest overall on the international front. And so for the most part, it's been a lot of conversations so far. It's been a lot of education. And so we're here and we're excited this morning to kind of share some companies and markets that are taking the next step in the journey. So, okay, so let's kind of jump right in. And again, let's kind of go through some of the emerging markets and who some of these pioneers are on the international front. And so Sam kind of alluded to this and spoke about it briefly during his intro, but the Global Data Exchange, or GDX, is the first of its kind collaboration with MLSs internationally. And again, it's 4 different countries and 5 different MLSs that make up the GDX. And this was something that formed very, very quickly. Again, all possible through RESO standards. And so I know we just talked about Stellar MLS as well as the UCO. And I think that everybody is mostly familiar with TREB in Toronto as well as San Diego MLS. But will you tell us a little bit about who SNPI as well as address is?
For sure. SNPI is based in Paris, but kind of covers all of France. It's one of the largest associations in France, and one of the first ones really that have, out of Europe, I would say, that kind of entered this the space in this fashion. There are other MLS initiatives in Europe, but SNPI took this kind of bold step on that front. And Aegis is based in Abu Dhabi. They've recently announced their MLS system and solution called Mahmoud, and also very progressive, trying to move forward really on this initiative. And really the key being here is RESO. We'll get into this in a bit in more detail.
Okay, so a couple of other MLS initiatives kind of happening around the world. The first one that we're going to talk about is called Swiss MLS. And what they've done is they've connected 3 portals all together in an effort to enhance collaboration and then also give consumers one place where they can go in the region in order to find out everything that's available throughout the market. I know that a lot of times on the international front, portals kind of still rule the roost. And many times the brokers and agents in those areas, they have to go and they have to enter all of the data into each system independently, which, you know, that takes a lot of time in order to go and enter that into multiple systems. There's data duplication, errors, things like that that you have to kind of deal with. And so Swiss MLS has, again, taken and mashed all these different portals together. It's the first time that I've heard of that portals have collaborated. Can you just imagine if Realtor.com and Zillow and Homes.com were to collaborate on something? I'm sure that they would be able to come up with something pretty neat. But this also allows the agents to be able to go in and just enter the listing one time. And so I think that that's a major win for the area overall. And so that's exactly what Swiss MLS is doing. So
I think what's unique about this is that usually you don't see MLSs being formed out of portals. In fact, we've never observed this so far. Usually it's an individual that's kind of forming an association, or there's an existing association and they want to set up an MLS because it's part of their the kind of member professionalism part of the notion there. This is very, very different. And there's always this friction between portals outside North America. There's always this friction between portals and these MLS initiatives or associations and agents. And so they're kind of doing something very unique there. They're not on RESO or anything yet. It's very, very new. But we thought it was worth mentioning here that the momentum is there for sure. Since Paris, certainly 3 years ago when we had like 1 or 2 that we observed, now it's gaining a lot of momentum and very interesting business models around this as well. And
Go ahead and tell us about Sync MLS too in Portugal.
Sync MLS, also a very interesting use case here. They've been around for 5 years, or they've been working on this for 5 years, which is very interesting because we didn't know about this until very, very recently. And the forum really helped with that, kind of giving a platform opportunity for these initiatives to really surface to the top. In this case, there's a gentleman called Sergio. He is actually a Connecticut broker. And it really originated, like many of these initiatives, from a personal frustration. He's Portuguese and wanted to invest back in Portugal, and realized there is anything near what we would call an MLS anyways. He explained that he reached out to a couple of MLS system providers at the time, and at least at the time there was no interest in exploring at an international level, at least in Portugal. So what does this gentleman do? He just decides to do it himself. So years and a lot of money into it now. He set it up, and this is also kind of different because he didn't start with the association. He started with, I'm just going to do this platform MLS. He decided to say, for example, that showing services need to be baked in. He wants to keep the data in his MLS system, so to speak, and now he's working with the association to kind of starting to bring that notion of MLS together with the profession itself as well. So very interesting use cases out there. Yeah. And continuing to another one here. And again, these are just examples, but some interesting ones that we wanted to kind of bring to the foreground. This is in Africa, one of the ones in Africa. Similar story, lady called Vicky. She is actually a Chicago realtor, saw the opportunity in her home country, a big gap, and she approached it from she wanted to educate and train professional real estate agents there. And so that's how she started, out of which an association grew. And this was about, I think, 6-7 years ago now at this point. And out of the association, the natural next step is to do an MLS, to kind of get all the data, cooperation, all of those notions. And so Loop Ghana is the Ghana MLS, and you also see Exchange Ghana or Exchange MLS, which I would consider maybe kind of like the MLS grid in Africa. So they're trying to connect different markets, multi-currency, multi-language across the continent. So great initiatives that are still young, but show a lot of promise.
Okay, so we touched on Europe, we've touched on Africa. Now let's kind of move into Latin America. One of the things that we've been working on with CEPI, which is in Europe, a consortium of about 26 different countries in Europe, and we've been educating them over the last couple of years on what an MLS is, as well as what an MLS is not. And so now we've also recently formed a partnership with SELA, who is also 18 different countries, 700,000 real estate professionals overall. This is a brand new engagement for us. We're really excited about it. And again, they're focused on education too. So do you want to expand on that just a little bit?
Yeah, we'll see, because we find that early on, 3 years ago, when we had the conversations with all these interested countries and markets, really it starts with them saying, we want the system. And they think of it as like, we want this piece of software, and off they go. And we know of examples that started with that notion and quickly realized it's not a technology problem that they're dealing with. And so the education part is really the first step and really key. So everybody knows what they should expect. The technology will follow in most cases very easily almost. And I put it in inverted commas, of course. All you technologists probably hate me at this point. But the big part is educating the stakeholders on what to expect when they do something like this. And so I think this will be an exciting project for us to really get them on board with that notion.
Okay, this is one that we have spent quite a lot of time on over the last, I'd say, year and a half. And I know that you've spent a lot of time personally working on this engagement. And so this is an exciting one for us. Why don't you talk about it?
Right. So this, my kind of ethnic origin is India, so I had like a lot at stake here because I really wanted to make this happen one way or the other, personally. So the National Association of Realtors in India, they approached us, and again, same thing. They saw a system, and they're like, we want the system. And so then now we're going to have a very hard conversation around what it really means to do this. India, of course, huge market. The association is made up of 40 associations within the country and about 50,000 members. So just a tiny fraction of really what's happening in the country itself. But those 50,000 are dedicated to the cause as well, of course, because they're part of the association for a reason. In India, there's lots of taxi drivers, your friend, your uncles, that are all real estate agents, and licensing is a question mark. So lots of other market-specific concerns around that, but this is the first time they're saying, okay, they're spending the time and they're dedicated to exploring this and getting it to a point where they're going to implement it in Mumbai. Mumbai, just for kind of sizing here, we're talking about New York, basically, New York size. And it was chosen as the starting point because the regulatory framework in that state in India is probably one of the most comprehensive ones compared to the rest of the country. So we're very excited to work with them. And really, when we talk about MLS, or anybody really, I would think, we're talking usually about two things. One is transparency and the other one is trust. And transparency is pretty obvious. The trust actually comes kind of like, there's three aspects to this. One is the trust between the professionals themselves. So the ability to share your information, hoping that you create more business for yourself. The second part is obviously the consumer trusting those professionals. And that's tightly linked to the trust in the data itself. And this is really where RESO comes in. Because if you have a standardized data set that works, that's consistent, that generates trust in the profession, and ultimately trust to the consumers. And that enables initiatives like this.
Excellent. And so the thought is to stand it up in Mumbai, get it up and running in Mumbai, and then move on to a different area.
Right. So again, we're there to support them understand and select the right solution. They may not need the Cadillac. They might just need a Fiat Cinquecento first, and then maybe get a Cadillac system. We don't know. So it's about getting the requirements and what they're looking for, and then finding the right solution there.
And their hope is to eventually create a national MLS, right? Connecting all these together. So
absolutely,
it's pretty neat.
Oh, I should mention one more thing, sorry. You cannot, well, non-Indians, so to speak, cannot buy property in India. So there is something called non-resident Indians, and there's a lot of them in the US and Canada. So this will open up the Indian market for them in a more consistent, reliable, trustworthy way. So that's another way to kind of bridge the gap here in terms of business.
Okay. So kind of let's go back to the GDX for a minute. And so again, this probably was the biggest news that came out of the International MLS Forum that just concluded in Toronto a couple weeks ago. And I think that this could be a pivotal time when we look back in a couple of years, as this was maybe the catalyst for really an international data share overall, as far as MLSs go, as well as other real estate entities on the international front. And so this is a really big deal, and this came together very, very quickly. I think that could this have come together without RESO standards? Sure. But it would have been a lot more painful. It would have taken a lot more time. And so this is really, really exciting. And I think that in a couple of years, if you look back on this, I think that you'll see a lot more logos, both nationally and internationally, that are going to be connected to this. There's been a lot of interest from other MLSs, some of you are sitting in this room, about this. And so this is very exciting. All of these are on different platforms, and they were all just made possible by connecting using the RESO Web API.
Right.
So, when Sam gets on stage and he talks about, adding value, moving the needle, this is exactly why we have put a focus on international overall. Okay, so like I said, this is, coming together. This GDX is a bridge. It's not a hub. We're not mashing everything into one system and then distributing from there. Everybody's on their own platform. There's no custom integrations on it, and everybody gets to keep their own system. So they get to keep their own rules. They get to keep their own governance model, and then the company that's put all of this kind of together is called Realty Feed. Will you talk to us a little bit about Realty Feed?
Right, Realty Feed is a subsidiary of, or sub-company of Realtina. Realtina has been really prominent in this international aspect of MLS, and they brought kind of the people together in the first place. They were working with the French entity SNPI and with Adris out of Abu Dhabi already, and so it made sense from their perspective to start connecting the dots a little bit. But it's not a requirement per se. So they're a facilitator, but it's not a requirement to use their technology or per se in this initiative. This is about bridging gaps, and they made it very clear, as long as there's a RESO web API available, anybody can basically join.
And a shout out to Ali as well as Giselle. I don't know if Giselle is in the audience here today, but Realtina has been instrumental in international MLS forum over the last 3 years as well.
Absolutely.
So they've been a major player in this. Okay, and I know that, I talked about that I think that this will be a catalyst and a pivotal point that people will look back on in a couple of years because, there's a lot of vendors in the room that would love to work with these companies. And so, anybody that is proficient and uses the RESO web API is now going to be able to come in and hook into this thing and provide services long term. So I think that hopefully that's exciting to you as possibility in the future. And one of the things that we're doing is we're just starting out with public data right now. I think that we'll see where that goes in the future. But like I said, each market gets to keep their own identity. They get to keep their own governance, their own rule set. And then again, RESO web API is making all this kind of come together through Realty Feed.
Right. And additionally, I think the condition around this is that this GDX entity has its own rules, or will have some rules, but your local rules, or the MLSs rules, will supersede it at any time. So if an MLS changes the rules, it's automatically superseding whatever general rules there are on the GDX.
Okay.
Yeah, and so very briefly on this one, think of it as like, yes, the data is coming together, so Realtina is collecting the data into one place to distribute it out from a practical perspective. However, the network, the policies, the rules, everything else, all of that is federated. So none of it is kind of centralized in that aspect. So it's a decentralized governance, standards-driven, and just the data is collected and put into a hub ultimately for distribution purposes.
Similar to blockchain.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Matthew and I have a little internal battle going on if blockchain is going to be a thing for MLS in the future.
Like the metaverse, right?
That's right. I was big on metaverse for a hot minute. Okay, so we've gotten asked, how are you going to solve data differences across these different markets? This is a little bit of a busy slide. There's a lot of text on it. But are there any of the examples that are here that you'd like to kind of go into?
I mean, mostly are no-brainers. For example, if you have IDs that are duplicate IDs that could happen across markets. Let's say there's a listing in France that has the same ID as the one at Stellar MLS. So you add prefixes to it to kind of distinguish that, to make sure that there's no overlap there. So some pretty obvious ones. You map where you can against the data dictionary. If there's exceptions, there'll be local fields and local enumerations. What is maybe more interesting and maybe not so obvious is that some markets in Europe, for example, actually a lot of markets, remember there's no exclusivity for these agents. They're dealing with the competitor that has the same listing as well, the same client. So there's a resistance to share the location of that client. And so even though the location of the property might be available, they would want to mask the exact location. So in this case, there's some logic applied for those properties to essentially zoom out and not identify the exact location. I think what we have here is kind of, what's the address, internet address, yes, no?
Show address on the internet.
That's right.
Yeah.
So,
and then it would have a no, and then right underneath that would be a map that was zoomed right into where the property was.
Right.
Right? That was always a little bit of a joke at the time. But what I understand is that these map layers are not zoomed into the actual location. Right. They're more zoomed out so that you can see the general area, but not necessarily the exact address.
Exactly, right. And you go to many portals actually outside North America, they either don't have a map, or when there's a map, it looks more like the Airbnb circle around an area where the location might be. So that's a reality that a lot of these markets will have to deal with, and that we're dealing with as well as these MLS solutions are introduced. Mm-hmm. And then the other parts are kind of currency, multilingual, the usual things that we have to deal with, yeah.
All important when you're crossing borders.
Very important. So experience in this case is, I think, key. If you as a vendor, if you have experience in multilingual, multi-currency, multi-metrics standards, then that's really helpful.
Excellent. Okay, and so kind of just wrapping us up here. Again, this was the signing ceremony that happened in Toronto. Again, this is very, very exciting for us. I think that this will be more exciting to you as time goes on. But again, this was all made possible through RESO standards. The standards are what make the network possible. And so the collaboration was something that, again, I think that everybody will look back in a couple of years and say, hey, this was really the start of something new, something big, and RESO was at the forefront of it. And so, when we're talking about, hey, why are you going out and talking internationally? You have so much to focus on the domestic front. I think that this is exactly what we were hoping, and it's actually happening quicker than what we were expecting. And so, plug to RESO, Data Dictionary, and all of the supporters on the international front so far.
And maybe one more thing to add is here that we have a lot of vendors in this room here, right? Vendors and technologists here. These initiatives, being right at the beginning of these initiatives allows us to suggest RESO or hope to implement RESO from the get-go. Imagine that's not the case. But because we have RESO from kind of the starting point onwards, it's much easier for the vendors in this room, at least, and others, and prop tech industry as a whole, to really start exploring new markets. It'll be much easier, much quicker to enter a different market. So this is the power of that standard, really, in this case. Mm-hmm. So,
and connecting real estate ecosystem across borders as well.
Exactly.
So. Okay, so just a little bit of a plug. So we do have a roundtable tomorrow after lunch. And so Ethan Bailey from the RESO Global Data Work Group is going to be there, as well as Mathew from the Global Data Exchange, GDX, that we've been talking about today. I know that we only had so much time up here today, so love to see you tomorrow afternoon to try to continue the conversation, answer any kind of questions that you have, come pick our brains and give us ideas. Okay?
Thank you.
All right.